and we all have our 15 minutes of fame, and I'd like to take a couple of my 15 minutes to talk about the rights and the wrongs in the world of professional wrestling.
For the WWE Championship.
This match is for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship.
For the World Heavyweight Championship.
The match and new NWA Heavyweight Champion of the world.
We appreciate you guys coming out and taking your time to support women's wrestling in America.
This match is for the AWA World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Rights and Wrongs of Pro Wrestling Podcast. This is your host, Mr. Green. How are you? And thank you for lending me your time to go through this review of another edition of WOW and, some other little tidbits of information about some other women's wrestling as we go along. Well, let me start with this. As you know, for those that are listening to this current, it is March. And as such, we are in the midst of March Madness at the job. And I can tell you that March Madness as a whole affects that job up and down the board. So much to the point that they do like vacation blockout. You don't need anybody taking off right now. I mean, of course, if it's something super important, yes. Maybe if you ask a year in advance, sure. Or something along those lines. But because of the amount of games spread across multiple stations, networks, and things like that, and especially the opening weeks, you're dealing with so many of them, it takes up a lot of the time. The reason that I'm bringing that up is because, of course, that rolled into affecting my ability to watch WOW on the basis of me being at the job. Anybody that's listened to this podcast before, or for those of you that are just tuning in, I work at, I'm just going to pull back the curtain just briefly, work at a television hub. And in that hub, we monitor a lot of different stations, a lot of different markets. But when it comes into this, or for that matter, any other live event, or you name it, it could be golf. We really don't have golf that late in the night, but let's just say, it could be soccer, basketball, football, the Oscars, the Emmys, the Tonys. It could be any event that will occupy / have the potential to run past their allotted window of time. And when that happens, there's a lot of shuffling that has to be done, and it's got to be done right then, and it draws your attention. So all of that to say is that what wound up being is that I did not get to see the episodes right there on the spot, which of course is why it's pushed back the way that it is. I would have loved to have done it, when it aired or relatively soon to that, but you got to deal with the money, and the money said March Madness is more important. And I think it also affected its broadcast here in Atlanta. I have not seen WOW on the network that it went to. Now, granted, the stations that I have seen it on where I'm at, March Madness doesn't affect it directly. Because in most cases, it's not on a station that the game is playing. Some other things might affect it, but not that. Here, I have no idea about whether the games ran on that particular. I don't think it did, but I do know for like the last 2 weeks, it has not aired. Couldn't tell you why. Have no clue. It's enough that they took it off of the station that we did monitor that was in Atlanta and moved it over to another one, but that was out of a purchase that had nothing to do with WOW or any other program that was on it. They really didn't have any control over that. But once it left what was known as, well, we call it WUPA, but it's WUPA. Once it left that station and went over to his new home, it got bumped back by 2 or 3 hours. I can't remember if it aired at 11 or 12 here originally. I want to say 11, but it could have been as far back as 12. Well, now for them is worse because it moved into the 2 a.m. time slot. Again, this ties into what we're talking about with the March Madness thing, and because once you're at a certain point on the playlist in time, you become expendable programming. Whether they like the program in the house or not, at that point in time, the station heads make the decision. Okay, where can you get this time back when a game goes long, or whatever live event that may happen to exist when that thing goes long? Where are we getting this time back from? Well, oftentimes you're getting it back from things that air 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, because the assumption is less people watching, so they won't know it. Cut into a program and join it in progress. That's what JIP stands for. And as such, you will either get a shuffling of time where programs are moved downwards, or you could probably get some of the show cut off. That happens. There's just a number of things that are going to take place when you're dealing with that live broadcast with a show like that airs at that time of night. Again, unfortunate, but it happens. That was just the explanation as to why some of this was not seen when I would have normally have seen it. It took me a little time, but I did manage to find it and sit down and watch the entirety of the episode. And let me tell you, trying to look at it just through YouTube is a difficulty if you're trying to get the entire feel of the show. YouTube does put in some segments and things like that, but oftentimes, at least before, they would leave things out. So even if you had the matches, you might not have seen what led into it, what came out of it, and I don't know why, but for whatever reason, whenever they edit on their YouTube channel, they'll just cut right into somebody talking, right? Like, boom, right? You can be in the middle of a sentence, like, okay, we're going to, and it'll just start playing the wild music. So all of that to say, it took a little doing. It took a little time to piece it together. I had to go literally into the database of the show that was segmented before they purged the system, at least so I could write down, okay, this came first, that came here, here's the match, blah, 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 and piece it together. Like it was just like putting together a jigsaw puzzle for at least the sake of continuity. And then here we are. So now we've gotten through that explanation. Let us go directly into reviewing this particular episode, which is a 2-match episode. They seem to be doing more of these lately, where it's less of the we have to have 4 matches per show. I'm not against it. In fact, I think in some cases it's helpful. But I also think if they're going to have a 2-match show, they probably shouldn't be afraid to have the match go longer than 15 minutes. Assuming that they have the talent in the ring to pull that off. But I digress. So, this is going to be a review of WoW episode 423, the title, No Rules, All Risk, One Reward. And the air date was March the 14th. The chronological number is 179. And that show began with a recap of the Enlightened helping Reina Del Rey win her match against Santana Garrett. It ends on Smart's promo, and then we go into the Power Positivity WoW show open. The next segment that was coming out of that we start off the show, I guess, officially with the Enlightened walking out led by Samantha Smart. Zane recaps everything that McClane, he recaps everything that went on, and McClane calls out the kidnapping. And there's no other way that I can really define it. It was a kidnapping. And he says that it was a tragedy, despite the fact that he did nothing about it, and he showed that he had every ability to do something 10 minutes prior. Smart gets into the ring with her entire group and basically explains what and why they did. What they did and why they did it. That's probably a better way to phrase that. I'm getting some terrible grammar. But she basically explains that. And for all intents and purposes, admits on TV that they brainwashed Santana Garrett. Zane, he tries to explain the situation away, that saying Garrett was under medical care. And this transitions into a match. So now let's stop with the promo, the Samantha Smart promo, how they enlightened her and what they did, and we showed her the way or whatever they was talking about. I don't know what to say about this. The angle of them kidnapping Santana Garrett is absurd. I'm sorry. It is. It's absurd. And it doesn't feel like the Enlightened have a general theme attached to them. Like the reaction that we, the viewer, and the people within that universe are not overly unified. You would hear Zane or McClane, wow, this is creepy, stuff like that, but it doesn't feel that way when they come out. Nor do they have people that react towards that within their universe, other than the two commentators, which just makes them sound like they scare easy. But we can get off into the whole brainwashing thing. Look, we've seen this story before. If you've watched WoW at any general length, this feels like it could be a recycled thing. Stretched out, true, but it feels like it could be a recycled thing. We've already had Princess Ozzy go through the kidnapping and then coming back as part of the group, even though I don't know if that group ever had an official name to it. We'll just call them evil. With Siren the Voodoo Doll, Holiday, and then Ozzy was just part of the pack. And then inexplicably, she wasn't. So we've had some variation of this that existed. Now we have this one, but I don't know which ones were. Like the first one, you went off of the concept that maybe Siren did something to her and got her into this. But I said then, it's like, where's Princess Ozzy's friends? Who there is fighting for her? Even if they, in storyline, failed to get her free, who there was fighting for her? Here it was worse. It's like they made zero effort as this group moved at a snail's pace to get out of there from the crime they just committed. And nothing. No, hey, help. None of that. So anyway, Smart's promo didn't really do much for it this much, but it does explain what they did. Yeah, I got to give them credit to do that. And again, Nigel and David appear to try to want to make the Enlightened seem creepy, but I wish that was a mandate given across the board. And I'll explain that as we go into the next segment. And the next segment, of course, is the match itself. The Enlightened being represented by Nova Sky, Miranda the Mindful, and Pandemonium. Oh boy, these names. I mean, Nova Sky's name ain't that bad. I don't have an issue with Miranda the Mindful other than that I like Miranda Mirage better. And like I said, Miranda the Mindful just makes me think of a nice children's book. Or, I mean, just imagine if the PBS kids said, hey, guys, coming up next is going to be Caillou and Clifford the Big Red Dog and Miranda the Mindful, showing you the joys of sharing today, all today on PBS. I like it. It would sound like it fit right in. I'm pretty sure if I just went into Chat GTP, right? GPT, say it right. If I went into that right now, it's like, make me a kid's book cover and call it Miranda the Mindful. It's like, it probably would look like it was tailor-made for it. And they are going against Xena Phoenix, Sierra Sands, and Lil J Boogie. All right. Now I know anybody that's heard me may be expecting me to just go in on J Boogie today. I am going to try and restrain that, because I don't want to have the accusations being mean. So we'll call this as carefully and with as much description as I can to try to alleviate that. How we'll go that way. So we already start with our heel team in the ring. Now keep in mind, again, the narrative that the commentators at least are maybe they're not over pushing it, but it is mentioned that the Enlightened are creepy. I see nothing creepy about this group. Nothing. I don't see anything that would make me feel like, ooh, or there's this aura of whatever the case. I mean, yes, it's TV, I get it, but no, nothing. I have nothing towards that, because not only are they not doing it, like the people that they're against aren't doing it. So why should I feel like that? For what reason would I look at them and think, ooh, creepy? It just looked like a bunch of wrestlers, and not even scary ones. So I'm not sure if this is supposed to be presented as a dangerous group, even though it feels like that's the motivation, or that's what they're trying to get across to the people that's watching, that this is somehow is some dangerous group that you should be concerned about, or at least be concerned about it for the benefit of the people that you like on TV. That's what it feels like they want to get across. What you got was 3 people that came out there that could care less. They didn't seem bothered by the Enlightened whatsoever. I mean, within seconds of starting the match. First of all, okay, let me rewind here for a second and say our baby faces come out. It is also should be noted that the Enlightened are doing their little hand thing. They hold the hand up, even though for whatever reason Nova Sky was not participating in doing the hand deal. She just held up her fist like she was showing her wrist gauntlet that wasn't there. I don't know what that was about. I do know that it was at least explained what the hand gesture means, but it was explained on the podcast, and I can't say it enough. Yeah, it was nice that it's explained, but it was explained on the podcast, which does not count for their television. If it didn't happen on their TV, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. For all intents and purposes, you might as well just say it didn't happen, because the rest of those people, if it weren't a part of the couple of people that saw that particular podcast that day, like, what difference does it make? It just looked like they're holding up the claw. That's where it's been in wrestling for the last 30 years. With Von Erichs and Baron Von Raschke, like it came off like that. Maybe one day they'll explain it for the rest of the viewing public. I don't know. But before we go to the baby faces, let's address some of the members of the Enlightened. I don't know what the gimmicks are fully supposed to be here. Like, Mindful and Nova Sky in particular, despite whatever background that there was, she's reading minds and this, that, and then Nova Sky is calculating all possibilities and this, that, and the other, and she's, cyborg or whatever the fuck. I don't know. Anyhow, I don't really get that they work any differently than they would if they were just normal people. And the gimmick is fine, I suppose. But what about Miranda has changed? Other than the outfit, and she walks out there with a bright red tomato. And Sky, again, what is the gimmick supposed to be? Because once she's in the ring, it's like whatever it is that she's portraying stops. It doesn't affect her match. And it doesn't seem to enter into the ring during the match. Just like she's just another person. And I don't even mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying this, it doesn't come across like whatever it is that she's looking to portray exists once the bell rings. And in some cases, you might say that it doesn't exist before it. Mindful, I said I was good with the outfit. I'm fine with the change. The only thing that I wish that they had done is that they had just kept the name, Miranda Mirage. I'm not good on everybody having some level of alliteration, but Miranda Mirage sounds better than Miranda the Mindful. If they had the look that she does right now, she was still Mirage, that'd be fine. In fact, they could have just dropped the Miranda altogether, just be like, here's the Mirage. But she has really not really changed all that much. She hasn't developed a style, and this probably applies to both of them. I don't think that a individual style has been created for either one of them. And I'm sure it's hard for them to come up with that because it takes a while. It takes a while to develop who you are and what you want to do and how you want to work within the ring. So at this point, it's just like they work like everybody else. It's not a lot of difference to them. Now, the one name that I didn't mention within that was Pandemonium. The reason being is that for whatever I can say about the name, and I'm not really high on the name, but I will give her the credit where it's due in that of the three of them, she seems to be the most committed. In the time that I've seen it, it's not like she overdoes a bunch of stuff. And it's not like I would say, oh, man, she's a phenomenal. I don't know that yet. We had, the second match and the sixth person. So it's not a real good example of what she could do individually. But she has had her moments where she's committed into acting like a nut. If there's anything that you can say about her as a persona on the ring or persona on your screen, she at least commits to the crazy. Cannot take that away. Maybe the other two will start forging who they are and start to discover it as it goes along, but I hope that they do. Pandemonium, I think, again, she probably is going to need some time to really kick that thing in gear to get the gimmick over, but at least did the efforts there. Again, I have to give her that. The effort exists. Now back to our baby faces. So they come out, and we get Jay Boogie and Xena Phoenix and Sarah Sands, and they walking out there, and Boogie's got the giant fucking boom box. If there was anything that I could have said at that point, the only request I might have had if I was directing this thing is say, okay, next time, can you be in the back of this line? Because that thing just comes off like it's just blocking the shot, whether it's actually happening or not. So they're like, why don't we just try this in the opposite end? You pull up the rear with the box so it's not in directly over the face of your partners. But then here we go. It starts off with this. This goes back to that, are they supposed to be creepy thing? Because they come out smiling and dancing and not concerned about anything and just get into the ring mere feet away from them and it's like, all's right with the world. J Boogie's about to start the match, and without any concern to this person across the ring then whatsoever, she just starts dancing. She breaks out and does the robot. It looks like she's just goofing off with her. Again, is this supposed to be a creepy group or not? Are you supposed to be afraid of them? This is the same group that not all that long ago just kidnapped and openly admitted to brainwashing one of your roster members. Why wouldn't you have some level of concern? But that's always been one of my issues with certain characters, is that they don't seem to apply what they might or should be feeling at that moment to that situation. And this felt like one of those moments where it's like, okay, what is it that we are supposed to be doing? And to be fair, that may be an issue of lack of direction. I don't know that. But to be fair, that could be the case. It could just be like, all right, guys, go out there and have a match. And no one said, hey, this is what we're trying to do here. We're going to get the Enlightened over. So what we need you to do is go out there and treat them like you're concerned. You're a little bit worried about what they're doing. You don't want to get too close to this person or, whatever the case. However it is that they might have described it, nothing about the Enlightened. I mean, despite the fact that they won, let's just call what the spoiler is here. They won. But despite that, nothing about the Enlightened really would show you that they are anything different than any other faction that's there. I mean, beyond the gimmick, what makes them any different than the Alliance? What makes them any different than Top Tier? What makes them any different than Fab Four? They don't really have anything other, like I said, other than the gimmick. I mean, that's pretty much where that starts and stops. They didn't even come in there with some sort of dominant pace. However, like I said, I don't know what the direction was for this. I don't know what they're trying to get across. There oftentimes feels like it could be a case of one person doesn't know what the next one's doing, or the right hand doesn't know what the left's doing, as they used to say. Mindful performs pretty well. I don't know if I like the little spin heel kick in the corner, but she is utilizing her legs as a massive weapon component, which could be good for her. It is very much like there's a young lady that wrestles here named Crystal Rose, and she has mastered that at some point, where she almost could hook her leg around somebody's face and throat from almost any direction in the ring. And I used to be like, she is exquisite use of her legs in the ring. And she does. And I think Mindful falls into that. The pandemonium is yelling and screaming and laughing just out of the clear blue. So she at least gets into her character, her persona. It does feel like at some points within the match, they might have lost pace with each other, her and Sands. But overall, there's really not all that much to complain about as far as the match itself is concerned. It was a match to watch. It didn't really push a narrative. It was just a match to have and to pad the win of the Enlightened. That's pretty much it. So at some point, you got Classmaster that gets up on her apron to distract Sands, even though I don't know why she would do that. But and by her, I mean, I don't know why Sands would even give her the time of day. But it distracts her enough just to get the attention so they can get the heat on her. Sky does a pretty good DDT. I just hated that it was more or less just like a transitional thing. She popped this girl with a DDT and then didn't decide to go for a pin or anything. Just like, boom, all right, now it's time for me to do an elbow. So I don't know what that was for. It would have been nice if she had done it and just tried to pin her at the very least, instead of just taking this once mighty finishing move and just making it something that just happened within the course of the match. So we get Sands and she makes the tag. Should be noted, Sands, Phoenix, and Boogie, and for that matter, they all did well here. Look, I cannot give grief to the match. Certain things within it, sure, but I cannot give grief to the match. So the person that gets the hot tag and comes in to try to save the day is none other than Jay Boogie. She comes in with a nice, phenomenal drop kick. It was like right on the button. The only person I've seen that did one that was better at this point was Keita Rush. That thing was great. Which, I mean, it was a good one. And both Pandemonium and Sky took the good drop kick from her. They bumped hard. Here's where it seemed like it kind of lost a little bit of that. So Boogie's in the ring. She's got both of them. For whatever reasons, she decided to break out and do a breakdance pose on the mat as she got the other two in the corner. Pandemonium and Mindful. Okay. So, this is just my suggestion. Okay? I don't know if that particular thing works well for getting the crowd behind her. We've seen many people, well, maybe not many. We've seen enough. We've seen enough people over the years that have worked dance maneuvers into their wrestling. I mean, and you can go back decades for that. I can't remember the gentleman that was wrestling. I want to say it was the 50s. But somehow he worked in like his ballet. I mean, he was, they've seen footage of this. Like he somehow worked that into the match to where it fit. Yeah, a lot of that was showmanship, but it also fed into what he was doing in a natural way. This is the only thing that I have with this. That didn't feel like it was a natural thing. And I'm not sure if they being the audience would follow that as a natural thing. Just think about the different ways you've seen people with this in the last 30 years, for instance. Break out a dance move for the benefit of their match. And I wouldn't even say dance, just whatever it is that they were doing. Dusty Rhodes, flip, flop, and fly. That wasn't a dance move. And yes, it stretches a ton of credibility because they had to stand there and wait for him to drop that elbow on their head. But he had that thing timed down to the moment that crowd was ready. He knew when to break it out. Booker T. They called it a spinneroonie. I hated that name. I always hated it. It just sounded ridiculous. Back in the day, we just called it a windmill. But when he started doing it initially, he would say, like, let's just say he's in the middle of the match, take a clothesline, it goes down to his back, opponent's back is turned to him, and he would windmill it back up to his feet, which would pop the crowd because that was like his version of a kip up. It wasn't until he got to the WWE where it just turned into now just do this thing. But it still worked because he'd already gotten it over in WCW. Road Dogg. He wasn't a dancer, but he could pop lock. At least the upper portion of it. And he turned that into his punches. Again, timing. Scotty 2 Hotty. Same deal. There was a point in time where the worm was arguably the second biggest move / pop that you could get from a move in that entire show. And you knew it was coming because he knew how to set the table for that crowd. He had his routine down. Face plant this guy camera side. Stand up towards the camera. Arms outstretched, and he's ready to go. And he primed the crowd. And once he did his little walk around, at W-O-R-M, and then there's the worm, and then boom. All of those were guys that figured out the when and not the why, but they figured out the when and the time for when that needed to be dropped. That little moment that she had there, I don't know would ever get a pop off of her just breaking out a random non-connected move, if that makes sense. So the only suggestion that I would make here is you might dig through your mental database of other dance moves that can be connected into something else that can get the crowd going. That's all. And I don't think that, that's too much to say, and it may not ever happen. She might not ever even try it. But just to break out and drop down and do that to where some people there might understand what she's doing and some of them might not. I don't know if that really helps get her over. But again, hey, just my opinion. So we finish off the match here. Boogie does her thing, stacks him up in the corner after her little breakdance intermission move there. Gets a splash them both into the corner. Sends, who was that? It was Mindful that went out to the floor. And then we get Pandemonium in there with Boogie. So now Boogie is stopped from the pin by Nova Sky. Sky then runs across the ring to I don't know if Xena Phoenix was just daydreaming over there or something. I was like, how did you not see this 6-foot blonde and sky blue running up on you? But anyway, she misses that, or Phoenix misses that. She gets knocked off the apron. Classmaster runs over and starts walloping her with the book. Where was Dave McClain to get rid of her? Where was the, hey, this is unfair? Where was that nonsense? So she comes over there and starts smacking her with the book. Mindful gets a sleeper in on Boogie to keep her from getting back into the ring. Meanwhile, Pandemonium is still in there with Sands. Now, there's a little portion there where I'm like, I don't know what it is that they were trying to do, or, it didn't really make a lot of sense in terms of why they were just standing around. Boogie and Sands tried, this is during the time where everything's going on, the sleeper and the book attack and all that other good stuff. Boogie and Sands were trying to get a double clothesline in on Pandemonium. She ducks. She didn't turn around, but Sands and Boogie's being drug out by Mindful. Sands is distracted by this. So whereas I cannot blame, in the kayfabe universe of WoW, I cannot blame necessarily Sands for being distracted, like, hey, what are you doing? But Pandemonium probably should have turned around a little faster towards that, but that was a matter of seconds, so it's not a huge issue. But then she gets the old DDT from the second rope or the second turnbuckle in on Sands, and 1, 2, 3. This lunatic has scored the win for her team. Good for her. And it was a nice DDT. Because of the finish, I truly wish that Nova Sky had never gone for a DDT in the match now. Like it just, if she's going to finish this thing off with a DDT, do not break out a DDT throughout this match. That would have been the only thing, like when you come back to the curtain and say, okay, look, it was fine, but don't step on her finish. You don't need two different ones. Just do that. But we got that. And they all get to do their hand gesture. And I don't know. It was nice. I don't know where they were necessarily going, because this didn't forward the Enlightened. This was just a bump in the road. It was a necessary bump. They have to have a match and they need to win. That's the other thing. WoW had a habit of having people debut and lose, although I guess maybe teams might be different to that. But they have won. Was this their second one? So that's good for them. And if I were so inclined, I would applaud. But this is another case of the team being outnumbered and facing a team that's alleged to be dangerous. And that would be the only other thing that I could really say about the Enlightened in this scenario. It may have come across better for them, for the group of the Enlightened, if it were treated like they were supposed to be dangerous, opposed to, I was just another match, because that's the vibe that I got from Phoenix, Sands, and Boogie. It's like, this is just another match. And despite the fact that we got this new faction that did this heinous thing, no worries. The next segment was the promo for Full Metal Massacre. And I would imagine that as long as WoW stays underneath the radar, that the name Full Metal Massacre probably will not be an issue. If they ever get any bigger, I expect the inevitable lawsuit from TNA Wrestling. Next segment following that, because of Full Metal Mayhem, by the way. The next segment, Sibley Scoles has a segment, and this features Ashley Blaze and Tara Strike. They asked Sibley for a title match. Yes. They walk up while she's there. We're going to assume that the logic of this is that Sibley is in her spot with her camera, waiting to do her job. So within that confines, this works. I don't necessarily get why they would ask her. The first thing I was thinking was like, this would be like if you wanted to get a raise from your boss, but then you went and asked the front desk secretary to do it. Like, there was no real reason for them to go ask Sibley Scoles. And do you think that you can talk to the commissioner for us and get us a title shot? Why? Why her? And she didn't go to any commission. She went to Lana Star. The same thing that they could have did. Or they could have just walked to David McClain and say, hey, we'd like a title shot. So I don't know why it was a necessary function for them to include Sibley in this. Maybe they just wanted to give her something to do. I don't know, but it just didn't make a lot of sense that this team would go asking the backstage interviewer, do you think you can help us get a title shot? At what point has she illustrated that she had that kind of sway or power or influence in that company at all? I mean, the segment was fine. Sure. I'm not going to deny that. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in context. So they come up and they ask, like, she's already did this. names. Ashley Blaze seems like she's the front runner here. She comes up with her friend Tara Strike, and they're like, hey, could you hook us up with a title to talk to the people for us, please? And Tara has already won, and she proved that she could do it. And if her partner hadn't tagged in, they might be the champions now, or they would have won. So this is them trying to maneuver themselves, or at least Ashley Blaze trying to maneuver the team. That's what it felt more like. And Tara Strike might be going along with it, trying to maneuver them into title contention. Even though I don't know have they tagged up all that much. It seemed like this might be the first and only time they did it. But Scoles rightfully is like, I don't know. I'll see what I could do. Maybe, I'm glad she didn't just flat up like, sure, I'll talk to him for you. That it made more sense on her end to be like, look, I'll try. And that's all I can really ask out of that. Although, again, I don't know why these two would have went up to her in the first place. Why would you do this? So, anyhow, this is presented like they can win, opposed to tagging with Karakot. And I should say this is presented like they, as in Tara Strike, Ashley Blaze, opposed to the Dojo Defenders proper. Blaze is asking for a title match. Strike is like, we'll take anything. So it's like, we'll just do a title shot or not. Look, this is one of those points like where your friend should have just been firing an elbow. It's just like, shut up. If I can get us a title shot, just go with me. Don't work against me here. But yeah, Tara's wanted whatever she is like. We'll take a non-title shot, whatever. I was like, all right. And that might have been her saving the segment. I don't know, but because we know where this ends up eventually. So we get that. We set it up that Sibley's gonna try and work on their behalf. Next segment. Miami Sweet Heat and Lana Starr are now approached by Sibley Scoles for a title shot on behalf of Blaze and Strike. And I have to say, just the reaction that Lana gave to her coming up, it was almost like, oh, come on, Sibley, you better than this. What are you being an errand girl for? I got a kick out of that. Because I felt the same way. It's like, why are you doing this? So anyhow, Lana said she'll think about it. And, this was to set the, tone for the potential title / non-title match that they might have to jump through the hoop for to get the big goal or not gold, goal. GOAL. So they have that. Miami Sweet Heat and Lana seemed like they were less concerned with dealing with Sibley and more with wherever they were about to go and what they was about to do. I guess there aren't any other locker rooms. Like when they was at the other place, they had their own little plush locker room. Now they just seem like they're just hanging out in a storage closet or something. So anyhow, she says she'll think about it and I guess get back with them. The next segment is another promo for Full Metal Massacre. This is good that they kept the thread of the main event winding through everything. I know I had brought it up before. I was like, sometimes they'll have a match and then that thing will just happen. And the least that they could have did was, if they couldn't do promotion weeks in advance, the least they could have did is thread it throughout the episode. Well, here they threaded it throughout the episode. We're on promo 2 for Full Metal Massacre, the main event. This one shows Top Tier in a rage room, breaking shit. And that's how I wrote it. They're in a rage room, breaking shit. Not sure how this necessarily trains for the match, but, you know, it's I guess it's a nice visual. The next segment, Nigel Zane is interviewing Santana Garrett, which I found hilarious. Not that it was just gut-bustingly funny. I mean, just the opening line, like, hey, we're all concerned. I'm like, how are you concerned about her? Hey, Santana Garrett, we're so happy that you're feeling better. We were all so concerned. I'm like, yeah, you were so concerned that you didn't bother to lift a finger or do anything about it or even look. It took the backstage interviewer to go wandering around the set to go try to find this girl. Well, the rest of y'all was just like, hey, don't do that. I don't even know if they said that on camera now to say it out loud. I was like, did they even yell like, hey, don't do that? They did nothing. They probably was the least concerned people that you could see. So, yeah, that was one of those cases like if Santana Garrett wanted to go full on heel because like, hey, where were y'all? You just let me do it. You couldn't call a cop. You couldn't get a security card. You could do anything. Oh. So, yeah, I might have tuned out some of the rest of that, but I immediately called bullshit on that one. I was like, yeah, okay. He was concerned. It's two grown men just allowed her to get kidnapped. Again, and I'm talking about it within the logic of their own universe. You cannot discount the fact that not 10 minutes before she was kidnapped, Dave McClain got up from that booth and walked the Alliance out of that arena with security. And did not, it's like I can only do this once now. Didn't do it again. So as this is going on, Garrett was, during this interview, talking about she doesn't remember anything and she hasn't been hit as hard as she did when Lana Del Rey hit her with that book. Now, I believe I said something to the effect of Lana Del Rey hit Santana Garrett with a magic book, knocked her out, and she just stayed out. And I was joking when I said that then. I am now beginning to believe. I was like, okay, is this thing actually supposed to be magical? Because what else could it? Like, is it supposed to be like a sheet of lead in there? Is it supposed? It's too thin for it to have a brick. Is it supposed to be made out of concrete? I mean, what is this thing supposed to be? And then she's like, I don't remember anything. I have visions and little bits of memories, and the Enlightened is there, and like, okay, I've had the MRIs, and I was like, what? You did all for a book? Like, this is the same professional wrestler that's probably been hit with chairs or put in a tombstone, been power drive, DDT, super kicked, and every other move that is able to come across her skull under the sun in a pro wrestling ring. But that book was the thing that was like, holy shit, I don't know how, I couldn't remember a thing. So, the only logical thing to do when you have somebody who's got that kind of brain trauma is give them the green light to step back into a wrestling ring. This is one of those moments of, with friends like you, who needs enemies? Next segment, Top Tier. They got a promo that's setting up the main event. Again, we just saw him in the Rage Room. Now we got the promo time, and Coach cuts the promo, saying they train for everything. I will say this promo visually had a very ECW vibe. And I keep asking, I was like, is there a different director here or something? Because there's certain things that they're minor, but they're different. Like somebody had a different, why don't we do this? The promo, I thought, looked great for what they were doing. I have never liked the trio's titles, and I probably will not. But that did not discount the idea that Top Tier as a team are good. I just didn't care for how they got the belts, and I thought then and still think now that they were just born out of complete vanity. Just to make somebody happy. But this promo works. There's not many of them that I would say, hey, look, they should probably put this up there as one of their hallmark moments. But this is probably one of them. If I were trying to get Top Tier as a team over, this would probably be one of the problems. Now, it doesn't help that they lost the belts, but still. They had them long enough, so, we can move on. The next segment. Another promo for Full Metal Massacre. McLean says that Top Tier have never lost a trios match. It's like they haven't. They lost at least 3 of them, but just before they got the belt. So like, how do you say that they never lost? And I'm sure that they've lost at some point. But anyhow, I mean, the good was they continue to promote this throughout the episode. The theory being that, you could land some more eyes on this. Maybe you'll notify a friend or whatever, but at least that was the thought back in the day. I don't know if that would apply here. But it's better than them not trying to promote it at all. Try to get people to stay tuned. Try to get them interested in this. Maybe somebody, the old, even though this is a little bit more rare now, the old flipping through the channels might come across like, oh, hey, what's this? So they went into full promotion. Most of this show is promotional material going into the main event. That was the bulk of this. This entire episode, minus the Enlightened segment that took place earlier, is essentially the Monsters and Metal Top Tier show. That's it. The next segment recaps Top Tier and Monsters and Metal feud. It shows Top Tier losing at least once by DQ. So I don't know if they've never lost a trios match. I know McLean has his story that he tries to get across to his viewing audience, but every so often it's like he loses track of his own product. And there probably either should be somebody in the editing room or Nigel himself to be able to help him out on those things. I mean, I know I've heard Nigel give the correction to him before. We've heard it. Because it ain't the first time that David has said something like, oh, they never did this. But like, well, no, they actually have. He's done that. Maybe he wasn't there available to say it. Through or to call him out for it, or no one caught it in the edit bay. I'm sure for them it probably means very little. That, whether he's right or wrong. I still don't think that he's overly concerned with WoW's fan base in terms of keeping up with stuff. I don't think he gives a shit. And I always refer back to that Niggy Nashville Class Master match, because if you can put that thing on the air without any fear of backlash from the audience and just like, it's fine, then, yeah, I don't think you're all that concerned. I also wrote down Top Tier has lost multiple trios matches. What is McLean talking about? But it is what it is. Next segment is Monsters and Metal promo. I like the set that they used for this promo, the location that they got it. Again, it's something different. It's not just off in the broom closet. It's not just behind the LED boards. I mean, those things could have been fine, but it was nice to see something different. This is mostly Lane. Yeah, this is mostly Lane. Fury does speak in there, and of course, Chainsaw is not going to do anything except growl. But I have to give Chainsaw some credit. It just occurred to me that I don't know if I've ever seen her on any social media where she spoke. I mean, even to the point that I saw what was it? There was like a karaoke night that she was at. She was growling up on the stage there. A commitment to the gimmick, man. I thumbs up. You have to give that a big thumbs up. I don't know if she has been anywhere where it's been different, but if that is what she has decided to do with her persona, like I'm not going to be on camera and not be Chainsaw, then I say bravo. I say excellent. Now, at some point, if she's there long enough, she's going to have to, the character, is going to have to learn to speak. And she's not going to be able to go through like years and years and years of just, it's not going to work. At some point, she would have to evolve and start talking. She might not be ready to do that, but it would have to occur eventually. But right now, if she's going to stick to this and she's going to be Chainsaw and she's going to go to it to that extent, and it's not like she's, to the best of my knowledge, it's not like she's just all over social media, but for the times that I have seen her as Chainsaw, I mean, forget when she takes that off, but as Chainsaw, she remains Chainsaw. I say great. But back to the promo, Fury gave a portion of this, which they went through this for a moment at least. They went through the same "you guys cheat" promo, but at least it had more time to be fleshed out and they had some other things to add on top of it, opposed to the same old. Lane did it good here, as I said. This is seemingly mostly her. And she's clearly invested in being Daisy Lane. Next segment, and they had the chairs in the background with their names of the names of their opponents, I should say, on it. So next segment, the intro for the main event. Again, Katie Marie Jones has helps create a much bigger atmosphere for this match. Monsters in Metal enters, and I had to admit I like Top Tier's video wall intro clip. I don't know who cut it together, but it looks great. Of course, I don't see them as the greatest team in all of wrestling, but it looks really good. There you go. So this felt bigger. Goes back to what I said with their promo segments. Like, is there a different director here? Some of these things, they're minor changes, but they're nice changes all the same. From having a different camera shot to where you can actually see a clear look at the video wall, the LED wall. Having Marie outside the ring to give the announcements and, give the whole fleshed out entrance, which we saw with Pink and Cruz. Those little things like that. It sets up a lot. before the match starts, they go to another segment after the introductions. They promo for the following week, and they say Miami Sweet Heat will be, in action. This is apparently the episode is being sold on the star power of Miami Sweet Heat. No opponent was announced, and I wrote, "Will their star power be enough?" Although, for the sake of their program, the promo works because you did not know who their opponents were going to be. So I was like, all right, well, at least they didn't just completely violate their timeline by saying, and next week is going to be Miami Sweet Heat giving up a title shot to Blaze and Strike. Because if they had done that, then they would have just jumped over whatever Lana Star was, whatever decision she was going to make. So at least they didn't do that. And I bring that up because it has happened before where they'll go into a promo and then they'll just bring up something that hadn't been decided on that show yet. But here, you got Lana Star said, "I'll go and think about it." The promo did not give you the results of that thought yet, as it should not. So we're still on track here. The train has not gone off of the rails. The next and final segment of the show. It is Top Tier versus Monsters and Metal again, but this time in Full Metal Massacre, allegedly a match created or brought up by Fury. The match opens up with the babyfaces all getting chair shots in on Top Tier. And Nigel starts recapping as far back as Crush versus Chainsaw. I wrote, at least there was effort. At least there was effort. So, without going into the minutia of the match, talk about the match in and of itself. Just the whole, not every little move and step that they took. Because it's for all intents and purposes, whatever they wanted to call it, it was a hardcore match. That's pretty much what it is. It had a nice name attached to it. But at the end of the day, it was a hardcore match. It is very difficult to gauge how good or bad that could be because hardcore matches in wrestling are a wild and varied thing. There's no way that you would be able to convince an AEW fan that hardcore match was worth it. You certainly would not be able to convince a Game Changer wrestling fan that hardcore match was worth it. But on the other side of that, you could probably get some family-friendly, we'll call them, promotions across the country that's like, that was pretty good. Maybe even some people that look at them, they can get a little outrageous too. But overall, you get what I'm saying is like it being judged is going to largely land on what is your bar for a hardcore match. You could go the extra mile, like, well, it needs to have blood, or it needs, they need to show this or that, or you need to see them getting cracked across the skull. They need to jump off of 20 feet. There's a lot of variation to that. If you put this up against, again, well, I'm going to use AEW because AEW is like on a way far end of the spectrum as far as their hardcore matches are concerned. And I'm not sure, first, I'm going to be clear to say that by no stretch of the imagination am I suggesting that WoW get anywhere close to that. None. I do not suggest that whatsoever. I'm sure it works for the AEW crowd, but it is too much. Grind, and I'm not even talking about just the guy, I'm talking about the women. Their blood and guts match was exactly that. bleeding all over the place, glass, the tables, chairs, bar, just a whole bunch of stuff. Wild should never get the inclination to, and I know they would never try it, but they should never get the inclination to try to compete or try to be at that level. And it did some fine stuff here. There's no doubting that they punished themselves to try to make this match. Now, going to the opposite side of it, did it work for what they were doing here? Well, for that audience that was attending, it probably was perfectly fine. You could nitpick and grab some things out of this match that really didn't have any purpose or rhyme or reason for being there. But, again, what's your personal preference? It was enjoyable. It is not going to go down as my personal favorite hardcore brutality or, match that I've ever seen. But it was, it was nice for what it was. The thing that kind of works against them in this context, take away the comparative choices of weaponry, because other places would break out things like barbed wire or a flame, and I wish I was joking to say that. A flamethrower. Glass or LED tubes. Take that stuff away from this particular thing. The only thing that I would say that works against WoW in some degree is that some of that stuff is visually and painfully small. Like that ladder. Like, what are these ladders doing? What are these tiny ladders doing? They just feel like there was like a few teaspoons above being a step ladder. And maybe they felt like, okay, well, we can't have a 20-footer in here because you can't work it or you can't handle it or whatever the case may be. I would have preferred to just leave the ladders out of it. If you can't get a ladder that wrestling fans are used to seeing, don't get a obviously smaller one. Because it really didn't do anything for them. It really didn't help anything within the course of it. If you're taking those things out, there's almost not a single, except for the one that did in the corner, which was very contrived. There's almost not a single thing that they couldn't have done some other way. Like Daisy Lane jumping off of the ladder to get to the floor. Yeah, that could have just as easily been the turnbuckle. But the only purpose that it served within the course of this, at some point, a ladder set up in the corner. And then there's another one that's set from like second rope to bridge to that ladder. And the only purpose that thing served was just so that Chainsaw could get knocked out on top of it and jumped on. And that was about it. There's nothing hanging from from an open forum ceiling for them to get. They didn't need ladders. They weren't climbing anything. They weren't trying to retrieve anything. Yeah, you could argue, all right, well, they needed the ladders so they can set up the ring. Well, they didn't, but and even if they did, it's like, what are those tiny things supposed to do? But no, I've seen rings set up a bunch of times. Like, I ain't never seen nobody need a ladder for that. So there's no ladder that needed to be there. Now, of course, sure, somebody's like, well, it's a 3-hour show. They might need it for something else. Sure. Okay, fine. And let's call some of the spots. And Lane at some point does Terry Funk helicopter spot with the ladder. I appreciate that she broke that spot out. Even when the Funk was able to get away with it because Terry Funk came across like just a bona fide nut at times. So, his version of crazy did not come across like it was just made up. That whole Terry Funk middle-aged and crazy thing, he could not make you believe in the entirety of the show, as they say, but he can make you believe in him. And he made people believe in him. So even when he did something silly and goofy like that, it worked. And it did help that the persons that he was doing it with fed into it a little smoother than what Lane was doing. Because here, with Funk was just in the ring and he was spinning it as people were already there and standing up and then getting hit. Here, Lane got the ladder and they more or less just ran into her. Again, fine, whatever, She does that enough to where she just spins and I guess is dizzy and knocks herself out. Well, not knock herself out, but she collapses out of the vertigo that she gave herself. There's a portion of the match where Campanelli is trying to escape Chainsaw. Good shot. The shot of her crawling away up the ramp, away from Chainsaw, is a good visual. Just right there at the beginning of it, it's a good visual. But then we have to address the whole thing with Chainsaw. I had already said, the previous matches that they've had to find some way to neutralize Chainsaw because clearly she's goddamn superhuman and she can defeat all three of them by herself. That's how it came across. And this match did very little to change my mind about that. Like without a Chainsaw there, what chance did they have? That's how it made me feel at certain points. So let's get to the part where I did see the act of inadvertent superpowers. So we'll pick up from where she's crawling up the ramp. We got to conveniently place a wheelchair that's sitting behind the LED wall. Why that wheelchair is never used when somebody could really use it and need it when they're hurt or something like that, I'll never know. But here they got the wheelchair and she being Chainsaw, sets Campanelli in it and rolls her down the ramp, right into the ring, which then sets her up to be on the outside so they can all take the spot of Daisy Lane jumping off to the waiting arms of Top Tier. Because as this is going on, we see Daisy Lane set the ladder up, so we know that this is already about to happen. This probably did not need to be a Falls Count Anywhere match. Yes, they did make attempt for the falls outside of the ring like once or twice, but ultimately it didn't do all that much to come into play. But like I said, as this is going on, you got a ladder being set up in the ring, so something is about to take place. But man, that ladder looks so tiny. It looks so tiny. But Campanelli takes the bump of being thrown or rolled down into the ramp over to the ring. And you heard them like, there's no brakes on that thing. Well, it does have brakes. You can see the brakes, but then you can't necessarily stop it. That's if she's going fast enough. She would have had to clutch down on it. But, most people that use wheelchairs constantly wear gloves. Now that my cousin is in a wheelchair and he uses gloves all the time. So, you take it for what it is, and that she was incapable of stopping herself or putting her feet down. Because that would have been the only other thing that you could do. You could maybe try to slow down the wheels. I mean, all of that to say is that her going down the ramp at that speed and not thinking of something to do immediately is plausible, regardless of whether the brakes were there or not. I'll give that. I dispute that the brakes weren't. I'm just saying that she, despite that, she probably, you could accept that she could go flying down this ramp and I can't stop myself. So we've got our ladder set up, which was already put into play, and we got Lane is climbing up there, and Fury is holding the ladder so she can do her deal. I guess this is where being a stunt woman comes into place for her. She's already up, and she's waiting on them to get up so that she can jump off and do the crossbody on them. And it was, again, another visually impressive sight to have her just fly off and clobber top tier. This is the point where we start setting up the unnecessary ladder spot. Fury takes the same ladder that she just jumped off of, and gets another ladder, as I said before, and sits on the second rope, and then that one's operating as a bridge. And Chainsaw gets a table and comes in. So now they're starting to do their thing. If there's anything I've ever said about WoW that has been consistent, is like I brought up, it's like they have some of the neatest and cleanest hardcore matches I've ever seen. And I stick with that. But here's where I said there was inadvertent use of superpowers, or I should say, to be more correct, a display of invulnerability at this point. Coach Campanelli, somewhere along the line, gets a hold of a wrench. And this is like a big, heavy-ass plumber's wrench. And if you've ever picked up one of those things, it's solid. All right? She grabs this seemingly from behind the desk. I'm not sure why it would be at the commentating booth, but she gets it there. Now, the commentators have been beating you over the head with anything goes, anything goes. This is a hardcore, well, I didn't say hardcore, Full Metal Massacre, anything goes. And then once the wrench is in the hand, oh, well, no, you can't do that. That's just too far. It was too far, yet they did nothing about it. She crawls around the ring with this wrench. As Chainsaw, for like I said, inexplicably is trying to set up these ladders. For what purpose this was going to serve beyond what they got, I don't know. Like I said, the only purpose those things could have possibly have had is to do what she was doing. Take a hit in the back of the head so she can lay up on top of it and then be jumped on top of. And that was pretty much it. But that isn't the story there. The story is that she got hit in the back of the head with a goddamn wrench. And that didn't kill her or paralyze her or end the match or her life for that matter. How is that even possible? Yes, it is pro wrestling. But my gosh, man, come on. She gets up, Campanelli, and allegedly whops Chainsaw in the back of the head with a wrench. If you are incapable of stopping a human being by hitting them in the back of the head with one of them things, there's something wrong with you. Your arms must be made out of rubber bands or something. Because there's no way that even in their universe, there's no way that she should have gotten up from this. I can understand if it was some other, maybe a chair or something like that. But even if we're going with the weaponry of the wrench hitting her, it's like they did these things to her and made zero effort to pin her whatsoever. That was the only other thing that got me about it. Like, you just hit her with her. What else do you need to do? Why are you trying to add fuel? The fire's already blazing. We don't need to pour gasoline on it. Like, I've just shanked this guy with this 3-inch blade and he's bleeding out. I don't need to take a gun and try to finish the job. But that's what basically happens here. She lays Chainsaw out on the makeshift bridge, and then she decides to climb up to the top rope. She being Coach Campanelli. Campanelli comes off at the top on the back of Chainsaw with a stomp, and then that was it. And then she goes over and picks up a trash can and then hits her with that. Like, what else do you need to do? And again, at no point is like try to pin her. And you can't use that she slipped out of the ring as an excuse as falls count anywhere. She didn't even look in her direction. But she had Fury that came in immediately and gave Campanelli a sky high on the trash can and went for the pin immediately, as she should have. It was like Lane and Fury were more or less just bodies that needed to occupy the space for their Sherman tank to come in and do the job for them. And then we got the next act of, showcasing Chainsaw's either magnificent healing powers or her invincibility or a combination of the two. The ring gets cleaned out and we got Candy Crush. She comes in and she starts setting up the table. And this brings Chainsaw rolling back in. So when she gets in there, there's a chain that's already down on the mat. This is, I guess, the next weapon that Chainsaw has to endure. She's getting up and I guess that's the most effect that it had, is that she's groggy. And while she's getting there, she's groggy. Crush is just looking, to set this table up perfectly. She gets the chain, gives her Superwoman punch, we'll call it, right in the mouth. And it puts Chainsaw down on the table. And again, there is no effort to pin this woman. She got hit in the back of the head with a wrench, stomped on, hit with a trash can lid, and punched in the face with a fist wrapped in chains, and no one bothered to try. So then we get Crush, and she goes up to the top rope. And then Chainsaw awakens, and she puts her hand around around Candy Crush's throat and sent her in through the table. And she took a great bump through the table. Now we got Glitter. She gets back in. Glitter decides that it's a good idea to set up a second table after her partner just went through one of them. So we got to even this out and get some revenge and get a table and slam one of their people through it, I guess. So she's trying to set this thing up. And like Fury on the outside looks like she's trying to, or at least at one point, trying to get the The ladder's out of the way, but then she's got to kind of shuffle back down because she's not supposed to be in the ring yet, I guess, apparently. Lane gets up, and she's up on the top rope, and you talking about having some psychic powers, boy. It's like she just knew that this is the time for me to be up on the top rope because this seems like I will be able to utilize this to hurt somebody somehow or drive my body through somebody on the table. Glitter gets up on the top rope and she looks like she's going to attempt to superplex Lane through the table. Lane's able to fight it off. She steps down or she's put down, that being Gloria Glitter. She takes a smack in the face by Fury because she's surrounded and she doesn't have a friend. Backhand, then she gets a head claw by Chainsaw. Then we get Lane, who comes off the top rope. Big senton. Boom. Glitter's down. And then we got it. 1, 2, 3. Finally, the reign is done. They have lost the championships. Monsters and Metal have won the Trios Tag Team titles. Woohoo! And Lane is in tears. I don't know if I couldn't tell. Her hair is all over her face. I couldn't see it. And Fury looks like she's crying too. Now, look, if it meant something to them that they got those and they were willing to shed tears over it, or they couldn't help themselves and they were emotionally pushed, then, hey, great. I was just happy to see that this thing has moved on. That was the highlight of the show, is that this whole segment, this whole story, the trios titles and the greatest team and all the rest and all that stuff, it has finally come to an end, at least for the time being. It looked like an important win for Monsters and Metal, I can say that. And what I wrote down following that was the match was fine, and the ladies worked hard, but this match could suffer by comparison. That would be the only real drawback that they might have. The show at least kept the thread of the feud throughout the episode. It's not my personal feud to get into, but at least there was consistency. Top tier may be unlikable, but I don't know if I would consider them full-on heels. They are presented as arrogant, over the top, loud, and obnoxious. But within this, I don't like, are they full-on heels? I mean, walking into this match, beyond that, I was just tired of seeing them have the belts. Would you have been really wanting to pay for a ticket to see the match? Like, are you willing to pay money to see them get beat up? That's ultimately what it comes down. Like, that is the highest level of compliment that you could probably give any heel in a wrestling promotion. Would you have been willing to pay money to see top tier lose? Have they been that obnoxious, that annoying, cheated that much, done so many heinous things that you're wanting to see them get their comeuppance, and you are willing to pay for a ticket to see these baby faces get even with top tier for you, the viewing audience? That was what I, questioned. Now, fortunately for them, because it's in Vegas and because it was on Fremont Street and essentially in the middle of the road, that's not something that they had to worry about. They could just have the match, and the people that's there could just go along for the thrills and spills and the slams and whatnot and not really know who anybody is. They may not care. But would that have been the case? That would be the real question there. But it be that as it may, it's fine to see that this has come to its conclusion. I am interested to see what they're going to do with Monsters and Metal. I mean, are they going to go right off into rematch mode with Top Tier? I mean, you would think that the logical next in line would be either the Alliance or the Enlightened. Because even though the Enlightened are wrapped up in Santana Garrett, that doesn't mean that the three that we saw earlier could not take a shot at it. And they're going to need some heel teams to work against, but it goes right back to the same issue that I've had with those titles from the moment that they came in, other than that they exist as vanity belts. Beyond that, there's no division. You have a couple of people that can be thrown together, yes, but there's no division. Like right now, it may be the closest that you've got. You got Monsters Metal and you got the other two teams or factions that I just mentioned. The Alliance and the Enlightened. And I guess you can throw Top Tier into that if you want to have them chasing to get it back. That'll get you a couple of months if that's what they were trying to do between those three. But this is legitimately maybe the closest that they've had to a division of trios teams since the title's been introduced. But I'm curious to see who's up next. I'm curious to see, will they find some way to make these things interesting? I mean, for the long haul. Or are they just going to lose interest in them and then they'll just eventually dissolve? Time will tell. And that was it. That was the episode in a nutshell. Overall, not bad. There was a consistency to it. As I wrote in the notes, they at least had the thread of this feud throughout the hour. That was good. I mean, and I guess to be technically correct, it would have been throughout the 45 minutes of it. Because I don't think they started really promoting it until after they were done with the Enlightened. That was about 15 minutes into the show. So they did a fine job of that. I don't know if they're going to scratch that. I don't know if they should make it a common practice that every episode is 2 matches and a bunch of video packages and fluff. I don't know if they should get into the habit of that. But every so often, I don't think it's a problem with them breaking that out or not necessarily having 4 matches on the show. It doesn't have to follow that same format all the time. The one that they did for the last 3 seasons. Here, the format changed. As I stated, it felt like somebody else may have creatively taken the reins as the director. I don't know. But there are little things of how the camera was set up, how they introduced the main event, that it had an ECW style type promo. And when I say that, is kind of like the wonky vision that they would apply in the middle of a promo that they would do back in the day, where the camera's kind of zooming in, zooming out, and a little bit more chaotic than just being on a tripod somewhere. All of those things help make it an enjoyable episode. If they can keep that up, it might turn some people around. But that's it, folks. That is the entire review of this episode. And I look forward to getting to the next one because I was trying to get through these things back to back. So giving me a couple of hours, I might just crank this thing up again. Of course, you won't know that. You'll just see the end result of it. So that being said, if I'm going to give myself that additional homework, I might as well just go ahead and get to it. So why don't we close this thing on out by saying, you got another show that is coming up that is going to be built around, and you've probably already seen this by the time I'm talking about it, that's going to be built around Miami Sweet Heat going against Strike and Blaze. Of course, that is only promoted as Miami Sweet Heat within the course of the show, but looking at the press release that they had preceding that, I know they were going with this. And there's going to be a little bit of a follow-up on the number one contenders situations. Garrett and Sanchez are facing off. And I ain't going to bother to read the press release, just giving you that. And as such, I had to sit down and look at this. So, if you are on YouTube, please do the YouTube things, like, share, subscribe. If you're listening to this podcast elsewhere, ratings are good. We are available on greater podcast platforms everywhere. If you don't know where to get it from that, you go on to WPNWrestling.com. It is the centerpiece for all of the good stuff. Every podcast goes there. All you got to do is scroll down. You'll see the little podcast widget. And just above that, you got a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week stream of videos, wrestling matches. Well, some of them not even wrestling matches. Some of them cartoons in there now. But wrestling matches and interviews of talents that you've seen and continue to see on your screens across multiple promotions. And that's about as good as it's gonna get. So, folks, again, my thanks for your time and your ears. And this is Mr. Green saying that this is Mr. Green saying so long. And we will see you on the next go-round. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the WPN's Rights and Wrongs of Pro Wrestling. If you have questions or comments, please contact us via our Facebook or our YouTube channel at the Women's Pro Wrestling Network. If you're new to the WPN, feel free to subscribe to our channel and like our page. We appreciate your support. Thank you again for listening.